Yeah, welcome to this session. My name is Ibrahim Lukman. Congratulations for making this far. So here I'm going to be introducing to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Of course, before you can make it this far in your TileLab assessment journey, the assumption is that you have a basic understanding of HTML, you have a basic understanding of CSS, and of course you have little understanding of JavaScript. But just in case you just want to have a basic review of what HTML is like and all of that, you may just ping this link. It introduces you to how to get your IDE set up and how to have your hands dirty with basic HTML, and you can then follow through with the course. But of course, the assumption is you may not be able to pass the first test if you don't have this understanding. So today what we're going to be doing is just building a sort of form together, a functional form with just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. No framework, no CSS framework, no JavaScript framework, just basically HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we're going to be making a request, what we call a request to a remote server consuming an API, just posting that there. Alright, so let's get our hands dirty. So the next thing we're going to do would be to just open up our IDE. So I just open up my Visual Studio Code right now. So if you're using Visual Studio Code, fine. If you're not using Visual Studio Code, you can follow along with any other IDE you're comfortable with. Alright, so I just open up my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to go straight to creating a new file. Create new file, and I have it here. So the next thing I'm going to do will be to save that file, save as. Now, so I'm going to save it in my desktop. So on my desktop, I create a new folder on my desktop and I call it TileLab. So I create this TileLab folder and I call this one, I'm going to be creating a sign up form. So I call it signup.html. So once you do that, or you can just come and select the file type, and then make it HTML. Save that. Once you save that, the IDE knows I'm writing HTML code. So the next I'm going to do will just be to write HTML, and I pick HTML5, and magically have some HTML5 boilerplates shown up here. So if you don't have such, it's not a magic per se. So all you need to do is just go to your view. Once you go to your view, you install extensions. So there are thousands of extensions that are available from Visual Studio Code and any other IDE that you're using. Just find out how you install extensions to it. So you go to view, you go to extensions. If you go to extensions, you can come here and type HTML5 or JavaScript, any extension you're looking for. But in this case, what is relevant is HTML. So when you type HTML, you're going to see a lot of extensions by different vendors. So you can just install them. What they do is just enhance your coding. Because competition is tight right now. So you have to be very smart in coding. So IntelliSense is enhanced and all of that, and that's the essence. And you know that I just had to type HTML5 and this shows up. Now the next thing I'm going to do is just close this up a little bit and save this. Now when we save that, we can go look for our file. I go to my desktop and I have this my TileLab folder we've just created together. Now I go in there and I have this my sign up form. I will open it with let's say Chrome. I have that open and I have this as my blank page, nothing. Now the next thing I would do would be to change this title of this page right here. So I will just go in there and change the title to, let's say, TileLab sign up form. So you will have that saved. We can refresh. Once we refresh, so we have the title change. And so moving on. Now creating a sign up form entails using form element like that. Okay, so I would jump in and just write form tag. So once I do this, it helps me to opens that form tag and closes it, and it gives me an attribute action. So action, if you don't know about form, action is actually essentially where you want to submit the form to. So traditionally, these are how people use HTML. When you use HTML with basic ASP page, or use HTML with basic PHP page like that, so just say action, and then by the time the form is submitted, the other page, maybe ASP page specified or the PHP page specified, takes effect. That's the traditional way of writing HTML code, but things have changed. And so the modern ways of writing web applications will be to separate logic. You have front end separated from back end, so you are not going to mix PHP and HTML or whatever it is together. So for that reason, these actions may not be necessary. We are going to be removing it by the time we start posting, so I can remove it if I like. So form may have other attributes like name, which it will be something like this. We give it a name. It may have another attribute like ID, whatever it is. You can have an attribute like ID equals to, and then you can add an attribute like end type, like this. So I'm going to explain something like end type, let's say form data, text path, and all of that. So let's say I choose this. I'm going to delete it later on, just for explanation's sake. Now, once we have this form tag, action I've just explained, name, why name? The reasons this name is here is the same reasons you have a name. So sometimes on your page you have multiple form. On a page you have multiple form. You have form 1, maybe sign up form on the same page. You have login form on the same page. You have another form, inquiry form on the same page. Several forms like that. Now, when you're writing script, how do you differentiate one form from the other? There has to be something that distinguishes one from the other, and one of the things that can help you identify your form from the pool of forms is the name of that form. So you give it a name. So I can call this one form 1, or better still I call it sign up form. So let's say I call this one sign up form. So it's also possible that you have multiple forms with the same name. So then it's imperative that you have something that distinguishes all sign up form from the other, and that will be ID. Or sometimes you just want to target a form by an identity that you have specified. Okay, that's why the ID is here. Not all the time that you have to specify ID. You specify ID when they are necessary, and ID is similar to the name I've just explained now. It's just to be able to identify this form from the pool of forms. So I'm going to specify a name that is descriptive enough for me, and when I'm writing my script, I can specify that, and it knows that this is the form that I'm referring to. Okay, so the sign up form the ID could also be like a sign up form, like that. So it's just an identity of this form. This end type is the encoding type. When you're writing your form and you're submitting your form to a remote server, the type of data that the remote server is expecting will be what you have to put here. So most of the times you have the application XW, that's the default XWW form and URL encoded. And if you are, let's say you are sending your uploading files, let's say images, file, document, and all of that, you're uploading to remote server, the form type will be form data. So once you have that encoding type equals to, you have multi-path form data. So multi-path form data will be specified if you are uploading. Alright, and if you're sending just a plain text, you use plain text like that. So but in this case, I'm going to be removing multi-path from data. I'm not uploading, we are not going to be uploading, but maybe in exercise you may upload. So this is just what end type is. ID equals to that, name equals to that, action equals to that, and this is attributes. Of course, you should know that these are attributes. Attributes are just that thing that further describes that an element. So this is the form tag, the owner of the tag, and these guys, action, name, ID, and end type, further describes this form tag. Okay, So this is what we've got, and this is just for explanation sake. I'm going to get them off this page right now, so especially this one, so I can get this one off. I can leave the rest like that. Okay, so a sign up form would normally have, depending on the kind of, the need and the logic you're implementing. If you go to Facebook, you can go to facebook.com, the landing page, and try and see how a sign up form is. You fill several sign up forms when you create an account. Pretty much you should have a Facebook account, you should have Twitter accounts, you should have Google account, and all of that. Each time you create an account with this tech giant, what you're filling is sign up form, and now you're designing your sign up form. So most of the times they take your name, full name, or name split into first name, last name, and all of that, and then your email address, your username, your password, sometimes your gender, sometimes your date of birth, like that. So you have such information being required of you when you're creating a sign up form. So sign up form can be as simple as just email address and password, and it can be as complex as it could be depending on which form you're filling. All right, so now for that sake, we're going to just be creating a sign up form that has about 5 or 6 fields, just to introduce you to a number of tricks. Now, as you might have known, form will have several inputs and several form elements depending on which form you're creating. You might be creating a registration form, an application form, like that. So the data you are taking from one form differ from the other, and this is going to influence the form element you will be using. Alright, so for a sign up form, I want to take full name, for instance. So if I want to take a full name, I will need an input. Now, so if you're using a standard ID like this, by the time you put input, just by typing IN, and that's why I took you to that extension side that time. So you got input type equals to range, input type equals to reset, input type equals to search, submit, like that. So input type of equals to range is essentially when you have a range of data, and so let's say you have a slider. You want to create a slider that people can select, can say you want to have from 0 to 10, for instance, or 10 to 100, depending on which interval you specified. Alright, so you have two ends, and people can slide in between. So that's what a range is. A reset is you want to reset something to default. So if your form has been filled, and then you want to have it taken back to all the forms elements being removed, and then everything comes back to default. Input type equals to search, in which you can use S as well, is when you want to create a search form. By default, that form would appear as a search box. It will have that search icon on browsers that support that. And then input type equals to submit is the input type that you use to submit a form. Input type equals to telephone. That's when you want to take a telephone. Traditionally, before HTML5, all these inputs are being gathered. When you take input from users, you use text. Input type equals to text to take input from user. But as time went by, things start to get specific. So we want to try to get telephone, and then we'll create an input specifically to take telephone number from our user. The essence of this input type equals to telephone is, telephone has a standard structure. So if you want to validate, I want to ensure that what this person is entering is actually a telephone number and not a name. So it's easy to validate because I specify that what I'm creating is a telephone field. I can then validate that all inputs in this field must be a telephone number. So anything that is not telephone number, I can say no. Though you type something, but this is not telephone, so I am expecting telephone from you. So the same thing applies to time. The same thing applies to URL. Input type equals to email as well. So if you don't type in a valid email structure, which will be users at domain, if you don't have that structure, and I'm not going to take it from you. This is for validation purpose, of course. All right. So if I say input type equals to what I'm going to be using because of full name, so I will just say input type equals to text. That's what I will use. So input type equals to text. will be what I will use to take this field. So input type equals to text, name equals to, so the same reasons you have a name here, the same reason you have a name here, because you're going to be having several input fields. So how you differentiate one input field from the other is by naming, by ID, and by other attributes that you may specify. So you have name equals to that and ID equals to that. Okay, so I have this, and I'm going to call this, name of this will be full name. I want to take full name from the user, and I can give it an ID, the same ID. It doesn't have to be, it could be a different ID, and name doesn't have to match all the time. So because you may have a feeling that because sign up is specified for this ID here, and sign up is specified for the name here, they must always go along. No, I could use this one as full underscore name, whatever it is, or full name one, whatever it is. So it doesn't have to go with this. All I need to do is ensure that I know what I use, because this, I'm not just naming it for naming sake. This will be used later when you're writing other scripts that will process this form. Okay, so when you're writing other script that will process this form, this will be used later. All right, so let's say I take it back for the sake of just taking it back to full name, because I have no reason to call it full name one right now. So I have that, and let's see what we got just by writing this one. Let's see what we got on our browser. So when we do this, we have something like this. So we have something like this that we can type something on. We have something like this that we can type something on. So this is okay, but then this is not what we want to do. Okay, so the next thing I would do would be to give it a placeholder, because the person, how will the person know what I'm expecting from him since this is blank? So I will take it back. I will have placeholder, and I say please enter your full name. Let's say I just say enter your full name. Let's say write it together like that. Enter your full name, or separate, however. So when I refresh this, so I have that written there. Enter your full name. Cool, but not so cool. But then let's move on. So input type equals to text, name equals to full name, ID equals to full name, placeholder equals to enter your full name. So another folk might want to use, instead of this placeholder here, you might want to use label. So label serves the same thing. Okay, so I can say label for full name, just for standard DOM. If I don't put this for, it doesn't mean anything. I put enter your full name here. So label is essentially just to instruct your user what you expect from them. The same thing placeholder is serving. So but you find that modern days people tend to use more of placeholder, because you're conserving space, you don't have enough space. So enter your full name before this, or I just put it in here so everybody knows what I'm expecting them from. So this is just to tell you that this is what I'm expecting from you. So either I use label or I use placeholder. So some people use a combination of the two. So depending on what you're doing, and the essence is if you know why you're doing what you're doing. So I'm going to take this off because I have a design objective. So I will take that off. So I have this. I continue and I say input type. This time around I'm going to have email address. Input type equals to email, so I have name equals to that. So this time around, so I call it email, so like that. So I can equally have this as email. Like I told you, it's email, name and ID doesn't have to match, so they have reasons of being there, and both of them doesn't have to be there. It depends. Okay, so similar to that one, so I can have this one also as placeholder equals to enter your email. So for the sake of being consistent, so we use email address. Okay, so when we do this, we'll see what we've got. So we have two input field. Enter your full name, Kenny. Enter your email address, put whatever it is, and whatever is that. So there's no submission yet, there's no validation yet. Just type in, just type in. Alright, so we have these two fields. Input type equals to text, name equals to that. Now what more do we want to take from the user? We want to take username. So I said input, so I don't want to use capital, even though I can use capital. Input type equals to text also. So let's say I use input type equals to text, input type equals to text, and then I have name equals to this time around I want to use username, and let's say I call this one using camel case. I have username. So input type equals to text, name equals to username, ID equals to username. So similarly I have placeholder. So I'm going to advise you, when you're starting up as a developer, don't type as much as possible. Type as much as possible. That will make things sync. I don't have to do that because even when I'm sleeping, this is there. So enter your username. So for the sake of being consistent also, so we have this, enter your username. So I've got that. So the next thing I would take will be password. Let's say input type equals to password. So this time around I want to type everything myself. Input type equals to password. So and name equals to password if you like, and ID equals to password. Alright, so and then let's give that a placeholder as well. So I have enter your password. Okay, let's see what we've got so far. So this is what we've got so far. So I have enter your username, your email address, your full name, your email address, your username, and your password. And usually you have password and confirm password. So let's say I have input type equals to password as well. This, so I can just make that, so make that type equals to password. This time name is C password or confirm password. So let me say C password, and this one, let's say I call it confirm password. So enter your password again. Okay, so now we can submit. Input type equals to submit. Input type equals to submit. Okay, so value for that submission equals to sign up. So the value is what gets shown in your, so this is not correct, this is supposed to be inputs, and that's why I got close like that. So input type equals to submit, and that is what you've got. Input type equals to submit, value equals to sign up. So once you have this like this, now this is, you just have a straight line form, not to worry yet, not so much to worry about yet. So you have let's say you have Kenny, and when you sign up, you just, everything is just going like that. It goes nowhere, and there's no validation, there's nothing. Now let's do some sort of cleanups. Let's do some sort of cleanup as the elementary cleanup. um, Now I want this form, you know, all of them, I want, they are required, so users must supply them. So right now, if you don't fill them, you can submit. If you don't fill them, you can submit. So I'm going to, for it to be compulsory, you can do elementary validation. Required, just required, just required. When you say required, it means they are compulsory and they have to be filled. So required, compulsory, and they have to be filled. So let's say required is compulsory, they have to be filled. Now if we go there and refresh this form, so right now you're seeing this kind of uh, encoded URL in the URL bar. So let's say we have this. I'm going to explain this a little bit. Now when you submit, you can see that there's a validation now. Say please fill out this field. Okay, so now as I fill this as Kenny, it jumps into this. Okay, I submit. Okay, this is not validated. I think I did not validate the email. Where is it in picture? Because it was validated wrongly. Required. Okay, now submit that. So if I have this as Kenny, so it goes into this place. I put in something. Notice that this is supposed to be an email field. So I just put something that is not email. Now it's not going to ask me to put a standard email format. That is the level. That is why you need to have something like input type equals to email, because not ordinarily I could use input type equals to text and take email with it, but then there's no that validation, except you are going to have to write secondary level JavaScript validation to ensure that this email specifically is, and this field is specifically an email. But HTML5 gave you out of the box to use input type equals to email, so you can easily validate by just saying required. So this is going to validate with two levels. First of all, ensure that something is filled in there. Second of all, ensure that it's a valid structure, email structure. Okay, so you're going to have it that way, and every other thing flows that way. Okay, now we have, let's say we have all the email fields that we want, but this is hopeful. You will agree with me that this is not the kind of form that you want to push out and ask people to fill. You want it in a more structured way. You want it beautiful. You want it, you want people to appreciate that you've done something. You don't want to push this out. But back in the days, this is what people pull out, like in 1991, 1992, and all of that. So before the advent of CSS. So what makes this, a little bit more attractive is